All right, here we go. Greg Kading, welcome back to VladTV.
Hello.
It's been some years.
Yes, it has.
A lot has happened since your last interview.
It feels like I was in this room yesterday.
Right, but you weren't. It's been a few years. It's been a few years. And since the last time you were here, Keefe D has been arrested for the murder of Tupac Shakur. Now, I've done a bunch of interviews during that time, and I've said I've essentially solved the Tupac case, which you had a little bit of an issue with, understandably.
I don't know if I'd say an issue. I would simply say that, it's an ambiguous term.
Yes.
And so, I credit you with all of the stuff you did. You did a tremendous amount of work uncovering different people's perspectives and their own experiences. And so I credit you with that. It's just an ambiguous term.
Correct. I'm using it very loosely. I cannot solve any case. I'm not part of the police department. I'm not part of the FBI, regardless of what people may think. So all I could do is do interviews. So I used it very loosely. And listen, and I've said this multiple times, I really credit you with the most important evidence when it comes to the whole Keefe D situation, when you got the proffer agreement, the confession.
And in truth, I can't really accept the credit because it was a multi-person effort. So, I just happened to be the face of that effort. But in reality, there was a bunch of people working together to try to get to where we got to. So I can't really take credit. It's more of a we than an I.
Why are you the only person that's actually putting your face out there?
At the time that I wrote the book and started to tell the story, I was the only one in the task force that was retired at the time. And so that gave me the opportunity to kind of go public with it because other guys would have, had some issues with their departments, over divulging information on an unsolved case. Okay, what about now though? There's other members are retired as well too, right? Yeah, but you see like Vlad coming on with Brennan. Yeah. And Brennan was part of our task force. Oh, okay. Yeah, so he was one of the guys that was contributing to that effort. That's Blondie? Blondie, yeah. Yeah, rest in peace. Yep. Yeah. So other people have come forward since retiring. There's a guy named Mike Cowett, who was a sheriff's deputy that was helping out. He was one of the original guys back after the Tupac shooting that was involved in some of the Compton gang investigations. So other guys have and my best pal, Darren Dupree, he retires here very shortly, early January. So who knows? He may be wanting to talk about his experiences with the case. Okay. Was there any backlash from active police, any sort of authority when you start doing interviews and start putting out the book and, the taped audio confessions and everything else like that? Yeah, there were mixed responses. Some people were very supportive. Other people, just the cop guys, were a little bit more, hey, it's not right. You go and start talking about unsolved cases. But then you've got the other, side of that equation where people are like, hey, that's a great story. You should tell it. We support you. So you get different responses from different people. Got it. And, when I say that I've essentially solved it, what I really meant was the interview I did with Keefe D was, I think, the most significant piece in terms of the amount of people that got to see it. Right. The most exposure. The most exposure. Mm-hmm. That really told the Keefe D involvement story from the very beginning as to, growing up in Compton, how he knows Suge and his affiliation, who Orlando is and everything else like that, leading up to all the drama that happened between Bad Boy and Death Row. Right. To the night of the actual murder and then what happened afterwards. Mm-hmm. Although there's been other pieces, he did the BET thing. He, of course, has the proffer agreement with you. I think this was the first piece that really told the whole thing from beginning to end and then was put out publicly and millions and millions and millions of people got to see it. And, from what I understand, I know someone that's talked to the detective at, Las Vegas, and he said, yeah, that was the interview that kind of got them interested in really picking up the case and so forth. So when I say I essentially solved it, that's what I mean. Yeah. That's what I mean. I don't take any issue with it at all. So just so you know, I'm glad that you have a platform and that you can provide information to all of these curious people about what happened.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I've been
awesome.
hearing about the story in LA for years and years and years. And it wasn't until I heard the actual confession tapes, and then I managed to get a hold of Keefe.
Yeah.
And he agreed to do the interview because the book had either dropped or was about to drop. It was very close to that same time. His co-writer was right there in the room. And I'm like, look, I mean, if you wrote a book and you want to talk about what you wrote in the book,
right?
Who am I to say I'm not going to do an interview about that?
Well, if I've ever said anything disparaging towards those, towards that claim, listen, I'm just glad somebody's being held accountable. I'm glad that Keefe D's being, charged with Tupac's murder. And so if everybody collectively contributed towards that, then that's great. Everybody should be elated that, somebody after all of these years is facing justice.
Well, just today, Keefe's lawyer filed a motion and claimed the statements made by Keefe were for entertainment purposes only. The motion files that Keefe should be released on his own recognizance before the trial. If that is impossible, then they ask for a reasonable bail that isn't more than $100,000. The motion said that outstanding amount of hearsay and speculative testimony was shown during Keefe D's grand jury proceedings. They also said that, they relied on his book, Compton Street Legend, and also referenced YouTube videos he was a part of. But he said that the interviews were done for entertainment purposes only and to make money from a situation that LAPD officers and others had already profited from.
Well, obviously he's referring to me writing the book and profiting from that.
Yeah. And to me for the YouTube videos and so forth.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, of course, they're going to make whatever claims they need to try to accomplish the goal of getting him out. It's ridiculous because, first of all, he's a flight risk. So that's an issue that they're going to have to deal with.
Well, is he a flight risk? Because his house got raided and a lot of time passed from the raid to the arrest. You would think if he was going to run, that would be the perfect time to run because he still had his passport, right? He wasn't charged with anything. Why not run?
I think probably so many years had gone by that he got a certain sense of, nothing seems like it's going to happen. I've been talking about this for years. There's never really been anything. Yes, the raid happens, but he's not sure, exactly where this is all going. Well, now he is sure where this is going. So it's probably a different mindset. And keep in mind that after our proffer agreement, and actually somewhere in the mid-2000s, he got arrested with a gun. He never went back to court. They had to put a warrant out for his arrest. He ultimately got, arrested. But because of that type of behavior, when you fail to go back to court after you promised to, that is going to work against him in his arguments that he's not a flight risk because he's already proven that he won't comply with court orders.
Interesting. Interesting. Let's talk about what led up to this whole situation a little bit. So originally, you were on the Biggie task force, not the Tupac task force.
That's correct.
Now, Voletta Wallace was suing the LAPD, claiming that they had something to do with the murder of Biggie.
Right.
How much conversations did you have with Voletta?
Nothing during the investigation. We were prohibited from that because of the fact that she's got a civil lawsuit against the city. It creates a conflict of interest because if we go to her and begin to ask questions or provide information or anything like that, her attorneys could then claim that we're trying to coerce or interfere with the civil process. And that applied to Little Cease and Eugene Deal and all of the witnesses that were potentially going to be witnesses on behalf of the plaintiffs, on behalf of Voletta Wallace's estate. So we couldn't approach any of those guys because of that perceived conflict of interest.
Okay. Did you speak to her afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay. When?
After I retired, right before I published the book, I wanted her and Afeni to be the first to know that new information was coming out and that I wanted them to be apprised of that before it actually went public. So I went out to Pennsylvania, met with Voletta, and then...
So you went out to Pennsylvania, met with Voletta Wallace. Tell me how that conversation went.
It was very, I guess, bittersweet in the fact that I was honored to meet her and finally be able to sit down and speak with her about her son's death and all of the drama that had transpired over the years from the investigative standpoint. She was extremely gracious. There was just a certain spirit about her that made you feel really comfortable. Even though she would have perceived me as like potentially the adversary.
Now, this was after her civil case was dropped.
Yes.
Right. Well, it was dismissed by the court, right?
Correct. They retracted the case. So her own attorneys withdrew the case because I think that they had come to the conclusion that they were just throwing good money after bad.
Got it. They weren't able to prove that the LAPD conspired somehow to kill her son.
Every step of the way from 2002 to 2010, that was just a constant struggle for them to continually reinvent their lawsuit in order to figure out a way to get the LAPD to settle. But when the LAPD was, adamant, we're not settling for a dime, that's when they eventually said, we're going to have to just shut this down. We've been chasing it for 8 years.
Any idea how much money she spent on that lawsuit?
I know it's in the millions.
She spent millions.
Yeah. Well, her and the efforts of her attorneys, they're putting some of their own money into this also, their time and energy and billable hours.
Yeah. I mean, well, she obviously inherited Biggie's catalog and everything else like that, along with the kids. So she had the money to spend, but still, who wants to spend millions of dollars for something that's going nowhere? And you're having to deal with the emotional, turmoil of this month after month, having to dig all this up and deal with all this again and so forth.
I felt really bad because I felt like she didn't really know everything that she should have known about what was going on in her own lawsuit. I don't think her attorneys kept her directly appraised of all the ins and outs. And, but I believe that she was just chasing the truth and, what she was hoping to find some truth through this whole, process. And it had to be really frustrating when your perceptions of the truth continually get undermined by information that conflicts with that truth. So I think it was really tough. I don't think the money really meant all that much. I think that she'd have spent a lot more if she thought it was going to accomplish that goal.
I mean, from your point of view, was LAPD at all involved with the murder?
Absolutely not. We did, investigatively, there's no such thing as a perfect investigation. We make mistakes. And, so there's things that we should look back and say, hey, we probably could have done this or that better. But as far as the allegations being lodged against the department, fucking ridiculous. I mean, it's so easy to it really is. It's really clear and easy to demonstrate how these allegations had no basis from day one.
From your point of view right now, December 2023, who do you think killed Biggie?
I think Poochie was involved. I think Suge Knight orchestrated it through his, at the time, girlfriend / baby mama. I think she was the intermediary between Suge and at least one of the co-conspirators. I do believe Poochie was directly involved. There may have been an additional person who was maybe acting as a lookout, because that makes the most sense considering the circumstances of the shooting. He may not have acted alone, but those are the three people that I'm very confident were involved.
Okay, Poochie's dead.
Poochie's dead.
And Suge is still alive, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And his baby mother's still alive as well.
That's correct.
But I don't think she's talked recently.
She actually has immunity on that case.
Oh, she does?
She does. Yeah, she was offered immunity for her involvement in identifying the other two co-conspirators and for providing information and then working with law enforcement to try to further that.
But ultimately, that went nowhere.
It ultimately went nowhere.
Right.
There was an attempt to get Suge to make some incriminating statements, but, I think he was smart enough to realize that maybe I'm being set up.
Oh, she tried to set him up to snitch on himself, basically?
Yeah, members of the task force along with her cooperation.
Wow.
So that didn't go anywhere. But again, I mentioned immunity in her case. unlike Keefe D, who never actually had immunity.
Right. We'll talk about that. So then you went and met with Afeni Shakur.
No, I went to the offices somewhere not too far from here in the Valley where Tupac's business manager is located.
Okay.
I went there and she put me on a phone call with Afeni's sister, Gloria.
Okay.
And I said, hey, I'm just letting you guys know I've got this book out and I want to let you know that we've come to some, revelations. And she says, well, thank you very much. We really, really appreciate all the time and energy and the effort. But being honest with you, you're not really telling us anything that we didn't already know.
Yeah. Based on people I know that were close to Afeni Shakur, they firmly told me that she did not care about the police arresting someone in connection with Tupac's murder. That family has a long history with police departments, none of that history being good.
Yeah.
So nobody was trying to get someone locked up or, taking any sort of pleasure in the law, America's law, basically punishing somebody.
Well, I think the more important component of that conversation is her saying that you're not telling us something that we didn't already know, which was that Orlando Anderson was the shooter.
Yeah.
So I think that, regardless of whether she truly appreciated our efforts, which I feel is very ingenuine if she didn't mean it.
But that wasn't her talking, it was her sister.
Right, but clearly a representative of the family.
Yeah.
Who probably shares the same law enforcement perspectives.
Right.
So.
Right, but I just, for example, I don't see Afeni cooperating with the investigation on any level while she was alive, which she never did, right?
Well, I don't know that there was a lot for her to offer as far as the shooting itself goes.
She wasn't there. Yeah.
She wasn't there, didn't really know. But she immediately, shortly thereafter, had Orlando Anderson in her civil sights and, filed the lawsuit.
Oh, she filed a lawsuit against Orlando?
Yeah.
And where did that go?
He countersued for defamation.
Aha.
They washed each other out.
Okay, so nothing happened on either side. Got it. Okay, so then in 2009, Keefe D has a PCP operation that he's running and a cocaine operation. You show up at his house and you say, look, we're going to offer you a proffer agreement for cooperation in the Tupac murder in exchange for dropping all these drug charges that would put him in jail for life.
Not exactly. It's close, but not exactly. We never said that we were dropping any of the drug charges. There was never that agreement or that understanding. He thought that was potentially going to happen is that he'd get charged on the drug charges and his cooperation would go towards mitigating whatever sentence he received.
Aha. Okay. So the same day that you show up at his house, you guys meet and actually start the proffer.
No. So we go to his house, we meet him in his front yard initially. We have a brief conversation in the garage and we say, listen, we've got this case we've built against you over the past however long it'd been. And, we're aware of all your drug activity. We've had your phone tapped and all this stuff. And we suggest you get an attorney and meet us at the U.S. Attorney's office or give us a call and let us know if you'd be willing to sit down and have a conversation. He calls an attorney. That attorney calls us and says, when can we meet? We say, this afternoon is great. Why don't you meet us at the U.S. Attorney's office? And so that's what happened. And then once we get to that meeting, his attorney, representing Keefe, and the U.S. attorney have a conversation, and that's when the agreement to cooperate is made.
Okay, and that's the proffer agreement.
That's the proffer agreement.
Explain to everyone, because this question comes up whenever I do interviews about this, the difference between immunity and proffer.
So there's two types of immunity, ultimately. There's called use immunity and transactional immunity. I won't get into those differences other than Keefe never got immunity, which means that you can't be prosecuted. Right? That's the whole term. You're immune from it. This is not that at all. This is just a situation where you sit down You agree to honestly answer whatever questions we ask you about any criminal activity that you're involved in. And we will not use those statements back against you. Doesn't mean that you can't be prosecuted for the crimes, because you can, as we well know now. So his understanding was simply that whatever I say, they're not going to turn around and use it against me to prosecute. But they can take that information I say about other people and use that to prosecute them. Or if other people provide information about me that's incriminating, then they can use that to prosecute me.
Right. Now, you were secretly recording him this whole time.
I wasn't. I was completely unaware of the fact that there was a recording going on. I didn't find out until I think the interview was on a Friday, and that following Monday, one of the other detectives that had been in the room, a guy named Bill Holcomb, he walks up and he hands me a CD, and he goes, "Hey, this is from the other day." I was like, "What are you talking about?" It's like the interview the other day. I was like, "No shit, you recorded that?" It's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Fuck, all right. Well, thank you." So I was completely unaware of the fact that there was a recording going on during that interview. But, thank God Bill had the foresight to hide a recorder and to surreptitiously record that, because that became everything.
Well, what kind of recorder was it?
I have no idea.
No idea. He just said, "Here's the recording."
Idea. I'm sure it's a little micro recorder.
Don't worry about how I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is all perfectly legal.
100% legal. Yeah. And so it's in a conference room at his lawyer's office. So it wasn't like the room was wired. So whatever device Bill had, I'm sure it was probably just a micro recorder.
Well, but you said it was at the state attorney's office.
No. So the agreement for Keefe D to cooperate, that took place at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay.
And then as a result of that, we did several follow-up interviews.
Okay, at Keefe's lawyer's office.
Correct.
So your guy showed up recording everything secretly at this other office.
That's right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And how many hours of confession footage are there in existence?
Well, now what we were trying to do was isolate these interviews to specific subjects so that we didn't get all over the place. This particular interview was designated to just be about Tupac's murder. And so I think that interview lasted over 2 hours, somewhere between 2 and 2.5 hours. And then that was the purpose of that particular interview.
Do you still have all the audio from all the hours of interview footage?
For the Tupac interview, yeah. So that was 2 hours. But the other ones, again, Bill Holcomb wasn't in any of those other interviews.
So you weren't recording yourself?
No, we weren't recording at all.
Okay, but you have 2.5 hours of Keefe confessing.
Correct.
Okay, because the stuff that got released is, let me see here. The stuff that I've heard is like maybe 9.5, 10 minutes. Right? That's some of the stuff that you've released yourself during the documentary, and some stuff you've given me and so forth. But there's way more than that.
Yeah. A lot of it's just conversational stuff. We're just sitting there, he's going down this rabbit hole, and sometimes we get dragged down the rabbit hole. And so a lot of stuff's conversational. A lot of it had to do with just his affiliation with Zip, and other characters in his circle of influence. So a lot of it's just kind of erroneous. So the excerpts that we've all heard that make up that 10 minutes, those are really the sound bites that are really the critical ones pertaining to Tupac's murder.
Right. And I went through it again. Keefe said, we went to go eat. They just beat up Lane. We had a hotel at the MGM and a restaurant. And we were at a restaurant. There were a few New Yorkers, though, with Zip. And he was like, "Man, y'all need some help." They said, "We got this, but we ain't have no pistols." Shit right there was a perfect opportunity, baby. He told me in the lobby he had some guns in a Benz in a secret compartment. He acted like, "Y'all want us to come. We like to know where the motherfuckers are at. It sounds like going to be a Club 662. Like, yeah, we're going to handle this." He like, "Yeah, perfect timing." So I've done some interviews with T.K. Kirkland, the comedian, who was very close friends with Eric Von Zip.
Okay.
Number one, he established that he had hung out multiple times with Keefe D and Eric Von Zip. So that relationship is
well established.
Is real. Did Eric Von Zip ever tell you that he knew Keefe? Or have you ever seen the two of them together?
We all been together.
Okay, so Eric Von Zip and Keefe 100% know each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you've just made that connection official.
Yeah, we all know each other.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Yeah, and there's at least a half a dozen other people from Southside, from Keefe's gang, that all identified, hey, Zip's a guy that used to come through. That was Keefe D's one of his hookups. So Zip and Keefe D's relationship was pretty well established, even as far back as the mid-90s, shortly after the murder.
And I asked TK whether Eric Von Zip and Diddy had ever hung out together. He said all the time. He said he would hang out with Diddy and Eric. They were all friends. They all knew each other. Now I asked whether he's ever hung out with Keefe and Eric Von Zip together. No, Keefe, Eric Von Zip, and Diddy together, and he said no.
Oh, okay.
But it was established that Eric knows both these guys.
Sure.
So Keefe saying that they were talking that night is not far-fetched.
No, not at all. It's very easy to establish the relationship between the two. And I think you can ask Kirkland. I think that Eric, I'll just call him Zip, was good friends with Puffy's dad. I think that was the original kind of connection between Puffy and Eric, between Puffy and Zip, was I think that Zip and Puffy's dad were close.
Okay, that makes sense. I think Zip's a little bit older than Puffy, so yeah.
Yeah.
And Zip is dead now. He died of cancer some years back, so that's why we're able to freely talk about that. Yeah. Okay, so then Keefe said, I got in the van with the busters. I guess he means the guns. They didn't show up. We waited about 20 minutes. Let's go get some liquor. Came up on Harmon at Las Vegas Boulevard. Here they come in that BMW with a gang of cars. The girls are screaming, Tupac, Tupac. We were like, there they go. Made the U-turn. We weren't supposed to make a U-turn, just swung a U-turn and was in the middle lane. And we just pulled up on the side, checked every car to see where he was. Tupac gave himself away. Otherwise, he would have gotten away. I thought he was going to pull up on my side. You know, that's my little nephew. I want to look out for him. And then he pulled up on his side. If we would have been on my side, I would have blasted. I gave it to Dre, and Dre was like, no, no, no. And Lane was like, pop the dudes. Orlando leaned over, rolled down the window, and popped him. He said, yeah, Suge looked at me. I've known him since we were 7 or 8 years old. I seen a bullet go in Suge's head. I thought he was dead. Tupac was trying to get in the back seat. Suge couldn't really duck because he was too big. We made it right, and some broads in a Sebring was trying to follow us, stupid bitches. We went and parked the car by the carriage house. There's a parking lot on the opposite side of the carriage house. We left the car there and put the gun on the tire and left, front tire. We went and smoked weed and drank. And that's basically the gist of the confession right there. Now,
except for the kind of ironic part where an ambulance is going by, he presumes that that's the ambulance that Tupac is in.
Right.
Because it's coming from the direction where the shooting had taken place and where the car eventually came to rest. He says, yeah, they went by us and we were just standing there on the corner, and, you know, he makes the route.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Now, at the time of the confession, Orlando's dead. Andre, Big Dre, is dead.
He's dead.
But Terrence Brown, a.k.a. T. Brown, is still alive.
Right.
He doesn't die, because, okay, so this happens in 2009. Terrence doesn't die until 2015. He was actually, ironically, in this rapper Chief Keef's weed shop.
Down in Compton.
I guess in Compton, and then a shootout happens and he dies in the shootout.
I think it was like a robbery in progress, and he got in the middle of it. They were
really?
Yeah, I think they were robbing the weed place.
Once again, a totally unrelated death, violent death that had nothing to do with the Tupac case, just like Orlando's death had nothing to do with the Tupac case. And Big Dre, I think, was just overweight and died from just health
Natural
complications.
causes, yeah.
Now, you got the confession from Keefe. He's implicating Terrence. Why not go arrest Terrence?
Well, we couldn't really just arrest based strictly on Keefe D's word. We have to corroborate all of these things.
Did you know about Terrence being in the car before Keefe told you?
His name comes up very early in the investigation. As a matter of fact, when Brennan goes out to Las Vegas, because Las Vegas has asked him and a couple of other guys to come out there and identify Orlando in the MGM tape, right? So when they get out there and they're sitting down and kind of comparing notes, Las Vegas tells Brennan that, hey, we've got somebody called in and said some guy named Terrence Brown, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure exactly whether they used his moniker or his name. They said, somebody mentions Terrence Brown as being one of the people in the car. So his name came up really early in the investigation. And from that point on, he was always kind of on the radar. And then other sources from the Southside Crips were saying, yeah, Terrence Brown has been talking about it, bragging about it. So we already had that information. Keefe D was kind of corroborating what other people had said, but it wasn't going to be enough to actually arrest and then prosecute him. Plus, we didn't want to expose the fact that Keefe D's cooperating. So if we go and arrest him, we're going to very shortly thereafter have to disclose where that source of information came from. So it would have been almost sabotaging ourselves to act immediately. The best thing that would have and should have been done is to build a case against T. Brown, because we had information that he was dealing dope. Not at the level of Keefe D, but nonetheless, Brown was a third strike candidate at the time. So that's really what should have taken place, is an investigation into Brown, get some leverage over him, and then try to do the same thing where he works against Keefe.
But that never happened.
Never happened.
6 years passed, though, between this Keefe confession and him dying.
Right.
So all those 6 years, you guys just never...
Well, remember, so once we go out to New York, we try to use Keefe D to get Zip. Shortly thereafter, my department makes the decision, hey, pass everything you have on to Vegas. We're no longer taking investigative responsibility for that. Pass it on to Vegas. So at that time, in 2009, that whole investigative effort now belongs to Las Vegas.
Right.
So if you want to know why nothing was happening, you would have to ask them, why didn't you guys ever go after Terrence Brown after you got Keefe D's information?
Right, because Las Vegas PD wasn't involved in the proffer sessions with Keefe. And when you handed it over to them, they just didn't care at that point?
Well, I am not putting thoughts in their head or words in their mouths. You'd
Their
have to ask
actions
them.
was that they didn't do anything, though?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, got it. And ultimately, did you even talk to Terrence Brown, or?
No, he'd been interviewed previously by the LAPD, so we had his whole statement, which is he denies being in Vegas. And of course, there's evidence to prove otherwise.
Like postcards or something from Vegas?
Yeah, postcards, I think possibly a hotel bill, some phone activity. So there was plenty of reason to support the idea that he was in Vegas, contrary to what he was claiming. Once he was interviewed, and it was pretty apparent that he was not going to cooperate unless we did something similar to what we did to Keefe.
Got it. Okay, so how many proffer sessions did you have with Keefe total?
So there were 3 different interviews. We asked him originally, the first one was just to kind of test his honesty. And so we talked about just different murders that had happened back in Compton, such as some of the shootings that took place during that 10-day war. And then we went on to the Biggie one. And of course, the Biggie one, he claims that he was there, but he wasn't responsible. And then we do the Tupac one. And then, of course, so those are like the actual technical interviews. But then we're meeting with him to prepare him to go to New York, talking about what the best way to approach Zip would be. So there's kind of these ancillary interactions with Keefe D. that are all still under the proffer cooperation agreement.
Okay. Now, you claim that you sent Keefe to New York.
You went with
him.
Right.
And that you made him wear a wire.
No, we didn't. And the reason we didn't make him wear a wire originally is because he's just showing up out of the blue. Years have gone by, and for him to just show up at Zip's nightclub and, it had to be a very organic reintroduction. We didn't know if they'd pat him down, like, what the hell is he coming out of nowhere and asking these questions? So we didn't put a wire on him initially. We wanted him to get reestablished so there'd be a certain degree of comfort. And then if the opportunity arose where we could wire him up, that would have been considered later. But the idea was to just get these guys reacquainted with each other and let their organic relationship blossom a little bit. With Keefe D saying, hey, I still got a plug out on the West Coast. I can hook you up if you want to, maintain our old drug relationship. That was the plan.
Right. Well, I brought this up in my last interview with Keefe, and he denied it. He said that he wasn't going to set anybody up, including Von Zip, and that he wasn't going along with this.
Self-serving statements. I mean, he's signed up as an LAPD informant, and that's all got a paper trail.
So you have an actual signed piece of paperwork, saying that I'm an informant.
I have his flight receipts from the trip.
Yeah, I think you sent those to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's very obvious we were out there for that reason.
Okay, and I remember interviewing, since our last interview, I interviewed Mike Tyson, who was also friends with Eric Von Zip. And he told me the story on camera about how they essentially robbed Don King of a big bag of money. They did it kind of smoothly, but Eric Von Zip basically got the bag and then managed to get Don King out the room, and then they had this big bag of money, which they went and just spent.
You want to hear a story about Zip? So one day, Don comes and tries this shit with me, put me around $600,000 in a bag. And, believe it or not, $600,000 is heavy. I know you guys think if he told you guys grabbing bags like Tony Montana coming in there. They're not grabbing bags like that. Fucking Zip took the $600,000.
Really?
Yeah.
From who?
From Don, when he came in with the money, he's trying to do something, and then Zip thought, let's come back later and we'll talk about that. He's walked him out the door. He said, hey man, let me get some of that money to pay some people. I got to pay the people. WBC, the dog, come back. He's come back. And Zip, you never met Zip, have you?
I haven't, no.
Zip is such a gentleman. Please come back. Not right now. He's just not feeling well, dog. Click, bye. And then we're picking the money, like, wow, we're going to have a party. Let's get some bitches. Let's get everything. We got to do it tonight. That's $700,000 right there.
So Eric has a history of robbing people.
He's a hustler. He's a New York street hustler.
Right.
That's a funny story.
So I spoke to TK Kirkland about this whole situation, and I said, because the story, according to Keefe, was that Puffy paid $1 million for the murder of Tupac, and that money was supposed to go to Eric Von Zip, who in turn was going to hand it over to Keefe.
Yeah, that was the understanding that Keefe had. There's two versions of the story that I'm aware of. One was that, the total amount was paid, and then the other version is that only half the amount was paid because Suge was still alive. And so, it was supposed to be for both of them. Only half the job was done. This is the theory. And so therefore only half the money was forwarded. And then once Zip got his hands on it, he just, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to tell Keefe D that, the money's been paid. So that's the story.
Right.
Now Keefe D claims that two separate people had told him in confidence that the money was paid, people that would be in a position to know. One of them being a guy named Darius Rogers, D-Mac. And then another guy, I think he mentions a guy's name named Gregory Kane, Kane. He says those two people had informed him that the money was paid. So whether it's all true or not, I have no idea, but that's the story.
Right. Well, I do know, based on my interviews with TK, was that around that time, I'm not exactly sure if the timeline is perfect, but around that time, Eric Von Zip bought a nightclub.
Puffy allegedly sent him $1 million. They sent it to Eric Von Zip.
Mm-hmm.
And the story was that Eric Von Zip kept the money.
Right.
I'd heard he bought a nightclub.
Right, he did.
He did buy a nightclub.
He did.
So that part's true.
Yeah, because zip code.
Zip code.
It's called zip code. Yeah.
Where was it?
In Harlem.
In Harlem. Puffy's hometown.
Yeah, he had Harlem. He had,
well, not Puffy's dad's hometown.
Yeah, he had a place up in the Bronx, another club in the Bronx.
So
kind of
you're to coincidentally, you know, and when you look at the price of launching a nightclub, $500,000 will probably get you there. So it's hard to say. You know, I've heard rumors that there are, you know, some sort of paper trail when it comes to deposits from Diddy or something. I don't know whether it's true or not. I've never heard this. With Eric Von Zip being dead, I don't think whether you could really prove this on any level.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Right, because you and I have talked about this before, and I get this question a lot, is, you know, do you think that Diddy could somehow be dragged into this case criminally? I've always said no.
I agree with you. Yeah, I don't see how it could happen. Not based on the testimony of just Keefe D.
Right, because he's going to try to say it, but does his words really hold any weight at this time?
Not when you look at the monumental task of trying to prosecute a music icon, a multi-million, you know, close to $1 billion. You know, you're talking about a defense team that will be very difficult to overcome, that would be representing Puffy. And your only person on the stand is Keefe D, who's...
That's your star witness,
That's
basically.
your star witness? Yeah.
Right.
Good luck with that.
Well, leading up to what happened this year with Keefe's arrest, you've always said that Suge Knight's the reason why Keefe or Orlando or anyone else in that car never got arrested.
Yeah, I think that if anybody personally had a personal responsibility to solve that case, yeah, I would say that I hold Suge Knight responsible, because he could have, you know. I understand why he didn't. I don't agree with it, obviously. But yeah, if he really cared about Tupac's case being solved and bringing people to justice, he ought to have cooperated from the beginning, because it would have made all the difference in the world.
Well, didn't he say something in the beginning, like right after the shooting? Didn't he say it was like Keefe D's nephew and he threw Keefe's name into the mix? That's what Keefe said in our interview. He basically accused Suge of snitching in a way.
Well, Suge most certainly put it out amongst his own inner circle of people.
But wasn't there was like a newspaper article or something like that, or on MTV News or something, where Keefe's name was thrown in there?
Yeah, I remember the actual source information of people that were there when Suge Knight. He doesn't say Keefe, at least in these documents. He said it was the Southside Crips. So he points the finger at the Southside Crips. Of course, the war starts the next day. And if Keefe D's claim of seeing, if him and Suge had eye contact at the time of the shooting, then of course, you know, Suge would have known it's not just Keefe D, but there's other people that were in the car that are his associates, thus the Southside Crips. So.
Well, Gaddafi, who was very close to Tupac, who was in the car right behind Tupac when the shooting happened, he saw the actual incident, and he met with Las Vegas PD and cooperated on a certain level. He said, "Yeah, it was a white Cadillac. The driver was wearing a hat. He was dark skinned. He had a mustache. When they say what he looked like, he said he looked like a bitch."
He said, he had a bitch face. Okay. But in that same conversation, he doesn't associate that individual with the shooter.
Yeah.
So that's just, you know.
Yeah, that's just the driver.
Yeah. So the arm that comes out of the car is just really, you know, described as probably a male black's arm that comes out of the car. It was, you know, in more recent years, they're saying it was a big arm, and you know, that was none of the original information.
Well, I know someone that was in that car who said it was a big, meaty arm, basically. And Orlando was skinny.
So somebody that was in
yes
the Cadillac?
No, someone that was in the car behind Tupac's car.
Okay. Well, the only ones I remember specifically reading their statements at the time was Malcolm Greenridge. Am I saying that right?
Edie, I mean.
Yeah. And then in Yafufula. And neither of them at the time, they were describing the incident.
Yeah, but I know people that talked and everything else like that and so forth.
Frank Alexander obviously didn't describe it as a big arm.
He did as well.
Not in his original statements. That's the important
later on
part.
He said that?
Yeah. So this is this whole thing about how memory and perception changes in time. But for us, the best information is typically the closest to the event. Mm-hmm. So when these things happen and people are giving you their descriptions, typically the best descriptions are the ones that are within a short period of time after it takes place.
Right. And Gaddafi ends up dying a few months later in just a freak accident, essentially, back in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Once again, totally unrelated to the Tupac murder at all. And I've talked to people around that situation and so forth. Okay, so then let's go to 2023, July 17th. Keefe's wife's house in Henderson, Nevada gets raided by Las Vegas PD. Mm-hmm. Were you surprised this happened?
Not surprised, because I knew that there was already a reinvigorated investigation and that they were moving towards that goal. I was surprised the day it happened because I was unaware of the timing. But I'm not surprised that it happened, because that seemed to be, it's all part of that investigative process of pre-indictment, grand jury, all of these things that were taking place.
So were you involved with Las Vegas PD leading up to this?
Involved in the extent that I was helping to provide some information from our case, just trying to bring them up to speed on anything that had taken place. I'm involved, Darren Dupree's involved. I think Mike Dorsey is leading this charge to try to get people to put pressure on Las Vegas. So there was a collective effort for everybody to try to work together. But wasn't involved as far as doing any investigative work.
I mean, when you look at a case this big and this old, how much money does a police department have to put aside for something like this? Is this millions of dollars, essentially?
It really depends on what extent they investigated Keefe. If they were doing wiretaps and that type of thing, that starts getting really expensive. But if they were just doing your kind of more conventional police work, then no, it's your investigators. They're getting paid anyways, regardless of what case they're
direct them over here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So they raid his house on July 17th. They find bullets in his house, but no surprise to anyone, the bullets don't coincide with anything. Didn't they find some Tupac-related stuff in the house, or?
I don't know exactly, other than obviously his book was there and some other, I think they took a bunch of photographs. Don't know what those photographs consisted of. I don't know of any memorabilia that had to do with Tupac. I do know at the time that the car that he was driving back in 1996, which was that black SS Impala, that had a Tupac CD in the trunk. When they, so here they've just got done shooting Tupac, and they've got his music in the car still the day that they impound his vehicle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of dark. July 17th, the house gets raided. 3.5 months later, September 29th, Keefe gets arrested in Las Vegas.
Right.
Between that time is when the grand jury is happening. Are you involved in the grand jury?
No, not directly.
Okay. I know some people that are involved in the grand jury. They actually were calling me. They called me like a dozen times. I just ignored their phone calls. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, they had to start leaving voicemails. And they basically said they wanted all my raw footage for the interviews, but I just chose not to cooperate. From my point of view, my goal was not to put Keefe in prison. It was to get the real story out. And also, if someone sits down and interviews with me, I'm not going to turn around and then use that interview to try to put them in jail, regardless of whether I agree with them or don't agree with them. Mm-hmm. That's just my own rules that I abide by. You know what I'm saying? So, and on top of that, there was really no raw footage to be had. If you know my interviews, we essentially put out everything, unless the person coughs or has to go to the bathroom or whatever else. Like we're not cutting out, important parts. It was all there. And, in between that time, between the raid and the arrest, Keefe reaches out to me and wants to do a third interview. Mm-hmm. And, but this time he wants to deposit because I paid him for the other 2 interviews.
Okay.
But this time he wants to deposit. And I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. I'm going to give him a deposit and he's going to get arrested. And I'll never see the money again, but whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm aware that this is probably the outcome of this deposit. And sure enough, we give him a deposit, he disappears.
You probably learned that from Suge.
Yeah, there you go. And I know that he hit up some other outlets and did the same thing. So it seemed like he was trying to basically stack whatever money he could. Once again, I don't know why he didn't leave. I would have left. Mm. Have you ever seen anyone successfully leave the country when they have an arrest pending and then just disappear forever?
Never to be seen again? Not really, not off the top of my head. I mean, people can be at large for a long period of time. Like, look at Whitey Bulger, right?
Yeah.
So people can be at large for a long period of time, but ultimately it seems like at some point they get caught up.
Okay. But you can go to another country that doesn't have an extradition policy, but then you're just in another country trying to figure out what to do with yourself.
Right.
Me personally, I'll be in the other country. I'll be in Iran or
you probably
Russia.
You probably have the financial resources to live elsewhere.
Yeah.
What is Keefe D? He doesn't have anything to support himself.
It's better than prison, though.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying
I'll take no RIA. If I got to work in a Venezuelan restaurant for the rest of my life, it's better than prison.
Yeah. Again, I don't know that he had completely been convinced that it was going to culminate in his arrest. I think he thought probably Vegas was still on a fishing expedition. He probably thought that his public statements weren't going to be used against him. So I think that naivete is what kept him around.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the footage of him getting arrested, the body cam footage, it was like the cop, I guess, didn't even know what he was being arrested for. He was just sent out to arrest him.
Right.
And he goes, what are you being arrested for? He goes, the biggest case in Las Vegas history.
Yeah, well, I think the cop was just playing like he didn't know, because there's no way you're going to send cops out to arrest a murder suspect without telling them this is what we're sending you out to do.
Okay. So he was just kind of playing with it.
Just playing, yeah. Just playing dumb to see what kind of statements Keefe D might say.
Prior to the arrest, the grand jury comes back where they finally indict Keefe. Now, I got to learn how grand juries operate during this process. I was talking to a lawyer friend of mine, and he had quoted Johnny Cochran saying that he can convict a turkey sandwich with a grand jury.
It was a ham sandwich, but yeah.
A ham sandwich, right, with a grand jury, meaning that you have a situation, the grand jury could go on for months, right? It can go on forever. They can keep bringing more and more evidence to the same grand jury, this group of people who have to keep listening to this evidence. There is no lawyer to counter this on any level. Mm-hmm. And they can just keep throwing stuff at the grand jury until they get the answer they want. Is that pretty accurate?
Not really. I mean, you can't just keep this thing open-ended indefinitely until you're convinced you're going to get the result that you're looking for. The process is a little bit more refined than that. But you're right, there's no defense, but all you're trying to establish is probable cause, which is a very, very low threshold. It's just probable cause. You're not trying to get enough information, you're not trying to prosecute anybody. You're just seeing if there's enough probable cause to demonstrate that it is prosecutable.
Yeah, but once you're under that probable cause umbrella, you have a world of problems. That you're dealing with. You now have to get a lawyer, and you're now facing serious charges and everything else like that. It just bothers me that during this process, there's nobody there on the defense side to say this, although this looks like this has something to do with it, this really has nothing to do with it. And let me explain to you why. That's not there during that process.
Yeah, well, that's what trial's for.
Right. But I'm saying is, I mean, how often do grand juries choose not to say there's enough probable cause? It seems like if you have the ability to keep coming back over and over again, you'll eventually get what you want, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it does seem like it's a little bit
Lopsided.
one-sided or lopsided.
Yeah.
Maybe from your perspective, it's unfair.
Yeah.
I agree with the process because I understand how this has to work, that you're building up from nothing. And it starts out with probable cause. Like every arrest that is made is based on a probable cause arrest. And then you gather whatever you have and take it and see whether it's a prosecutable arrest.
Mm.
And then if so, then a filing's made and somebody's charged officially. So it's just part of the process. But I understand where you're coming from. You know,
It just seems a little unfair.
yeah.
Like I said, like based on that process, you and I could probably get grand jury indictments against us.
I don't think I could. Not based on the things I've done in my life. I don't think I've committed crimes.
I'm just saying in general, though, when you keep providing things and there's no defense on the other side.
There is a bit. You have to provide enough compelling evidence to indicate that this person committed a crime.
Okay, fair enough. Well, part of the grand jury was this guy named Dirt Rock.
Mm-hmm.
You know who that is?
Mm-hmm.
Describe to me what Dirt Rock's role is in this whole situation.
Well, obviously he's a grand jury witness, and he says that he was there when comments were made by Big Dre, DeAndre Smith, and that I know that Dirt Rock and Keefe D have a very long history together. Dirt Rock was a Southside Crip. So he's going to be one of the, I think, testimonial witnesses that will lay the foundation of Keefe D's direct involvement in a gang to establish the gang enhancement.
Okay, but Dirt Rock said that Orlando was not the shooter,
Mm-hmm.
that it was Big Dre.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he broke it down, I read through this, basically it said that Dre was the shooter, but according to gang rules, Orlando should have been the shooter because he's the one who got jumped.
Sure.
So by allowing Orlando to take the credit for this, it makes Orlando look better. And it also takes the heat off him as being the shooter for one of the most loved artists in the world. So he was basically okay with this whole situation. The guy that's supposed to have done it is getting the credit and he could brag about it. The heat is off of me and the whole, all the Tupac fans in the world don't want to kill me. I'm okay with this. It sounds plausible.
Sure, but there's some loose ends to it also. Keeping in mind that there's other people who could say they could call bullshit on Dre. Terrence Brown knows who shot, and he's around during this period of time, and so he could easily counter that and say, no, bullshit, man. Orlando had the gun. He's the one who shot. So,
but T. Brown doesn't make any statements though. So
no, well, he does because he's down there bragging that he shot Tupac. So everybody in the cars, with the exception of Keefe.
Wait. So Terrence Brown also claimed he was the shooter?
Yeah.
Oh.
Everybody in the car was taking credit for it.
But not Keefe.
Not Keefe.
Yeah.
But all the other
he's
guys.
He's the older one in that crew. So
right.
He knows a little better.
Right. He's trying to tell everyone to shut up because, it's getting around that everybody's bragging about it.
So Orlando, DeAndre, and Terrence are all saying they're the shooters.
Right.
All three of them simultaneously. Like they all held the gun together and just, okay, got it.
They all want to take credit for it because.
Like, kumbaya moment.
Yeah.
Right.
For them, it is. It's, you're building your status. Terrence Brown was already known as a shooter. So it would have made sense, he would certainly do it at the drop of a dime. DeAndre Smith also had been looked at for a couple of shootings. And of course, Orlando Anderson. So all things considered, I think it's Orlando. It makes the most sense to me. It's most definitely who Keefe D said had done it. He could have said it was DeAndre and not thrown his own nephew under the bus. So to me, it makes the most sense it was Orlando. But everybody was taking credit for it.
Well, why do you think Dirt Rock is saying that it was Andre?
Well, because DeAndre may have said the same thing that Terrence was saying and, bragging about it.
Oh, so this is just because Dirt Rock wasn't there.
No. Oh, no. Dirt Rock wasn't even in Vegas.
Right. And Dirt Rock had his own drug case that he was dealing with, right?
I think he's had more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spoke to Dirt Rock.
Yeah.
He's considering whether or not he wants to
Okay.
say something or not, but
Okay.
we had a conversation about it, and, he's part of the grand jury, so at this point, the cat's out the bag.
Yeah.
I actually spoke to Dirt Rock before our interview and the Keefe interview, and it was, back then it was like it wasn't enough information to me to go forward with actually doing the interview, because it's like, I don't know. Some of the stories didn't quite match up, so I wasn't quite sure, and it's like I don't want to just throw someone in front of the camera not knowing whether it's legitimate or not. Ultimately, the grand jury indicts him, not convicted him because he's still innocent right now until proven guilty. When Keefe gets arrested, Suge Knight said that Orlando wasn't the shooter. He also said free Keefe D because he's got a podcast now from prison. When you heard that, what'd you think?
About him having a podcast?
Well, about him saying Orlando wasn't the shooter.
Oh, nothing that ever comes out of Suge Knight's mouth, it just dissipates into the stratosphere.
You called him a liar on multiple occasions.
Yeah, I don't believe anything that comes out of his mouth.
Okay.
And
have you ever met with Suge Knight yourself?
not in person. I did a lot of surveillance of him, but I've never met with him in person.
Did you ever get anything from the surveillance?
No, nothing that was any real investigative value.
Okay. Well, Keefe gets charged with murder. He pleads not guilty. And he won't face the death penalty. Is that a normal thing? I mean, is there a death penalty in Las Vegas?
I'm not actually sure in Nevada what their laws are regarding first-degree murder or what their potential sentences are in first-degree murder.
It actually is one of 27 states that permit capital punishment.
Okay.
But they haven't actually done an execution since 2006.
So, yeah,
17 years.
They're declining to pursue the death penalty. They are, from what I understand, doing a gang enhancement and a gun enhancement, premeditated murder. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a life sentence if he gets convicted.
Right.
Regardless.
A death sentence in Nevada has to do with individuals convicted of murder involving aggravating circumstances. Is this aggravating?
Well, of course it is. I mean, it's a pre-planned, premeditated murder.
I guess when I read this, I think like a serial killer kind of situation, but I guess anything,
anything could
be aggravating. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Aggravated is just the opposite of like heat of passion.
Okay.
Where it's just, you just react to something and kill somebody.
Yeah.
In the moment.
That's manslaughter.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that can be first degree murder too. You know, if you and I were run into each other and had an argument in a parking lot and I pull out a gun and shoot you, that's not premeditated, but it's still first degree murder.
Got it. Okay. He gets no bail. Was that surprising?
Nope. Not at all.
Because he's a flight risk.
Mm-hmm. And he also would be very likely to be somebody who would try to locate and intimidate witnesses.
Well, who are the witnesses at this point? They're all dead. Dirt Rock?
Yeah.
But Dirt Rock is that's a hearsay witness.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if he were to testify that Keefe D was part of the gang, that establishes that he's a gang member, and that is part of the enhancement. So Dirt Rock potentially could be an actual trial witness.
Well, but Keefe has himself said that he's a Southside Crip on many, many occasions, from your interview to my interview to all the other blogs, podcasts he did, to his book. You said that the star witness against the defendant is the defendant.
But he's not the only witness. So yeah, sure enough, those are the compelling evidence in that case is Keefe's own statements, but the prosecution is going to try to reinforce that with other testimonial evidence. Like they'll probably have Bobby Ladd testify that, yeah, I stopped him during this period of time. He only associated with Southside Crips, those type of things, so that the jury can get a broader and more convincing conclusion.
Okay, and he's facing life for first-degree murder with the gang enhancement and the gun enhancement.
Right.
Well, he couldn't afford a lawyer at one point, so he had to get a public defender. And then I think he was able to get his lawyer a little bit later, right?
Yeah, so I think he started out with Edie Fall, who had been their lawyer forever, going all...
So when you actually did the proffers, that was Edie Fall?
No, as a matter of fact, I was really happy when I found out that he wasn't using Edie at that time, but he had used Edie as far back as 98 when he was arrested and convicted on other federal drug charges. So when Keefe D went to prison in 98 for narcotic trafficking, he had used Edie Fall way back then. And of course, Orlando Anderson had also used Edie Fall. So he was kind of like the family's attorney way back into the late 90s. When we get him in 2009, he didn't use Edie. For whatever reasons, he decided not to use him.
Okay.
But then he shows up again, at Keefe D's arraignment.
Aha. Okay. There was a rumor that Keefe was attached in jail. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
People said it's true. Other people said it's not true. Hard to say.
Yeah, hard to say.
I mean, wouldn't he be held in protective custody considering how high profile he is and how high profile Tupac is and how he has fans of every age at this point?
Yeah, so I don't really know exactly what his jail environment is. Typically, if you are a documented or admitted gang member, that's one thing they'll consider. Your housing will be in an area that you're not with rival gang members. So that would be one thing that they would do a classification of him. But again, with him having murder charges in a high profile case, he might be what's called administrative segregation, which you're somewhat isolated, but not completely. Still, other people can access you. I don't know exactly how he's classified, but it's jail, and you're surrounded with a lot of people, and one door gets left open and anything can happen.
Well, now the trial is set for June 3rd, 2024. Do you think there's any plea deals that would get offered?
I don't think it's been offered yet. I think that they're going to go through these preliminary motions to see how far they can get with the court, see whether or not they can get his bail reduced, see whether or not they can get him released on bond. They're going to try to see how far they can go. But at some point in time, when the inevitable looks like Keefe's going to go to trial, and if all of the evidence holds up, like the motion to dismiss his statements, if that is rejected by the judge, and it looks like he's going to have to go to trial and face his own public statements, then they'll probably recognize this as a losing, endeavor and try to take a plea deal. Maybe they'll say, "Hey, listen, we'll take life, drop the, possibility of parole, drop the gang enhancement, drop the gun enhancement," and at that time, the district attorney will reevaluate whether or not it's in their best interest to drop those charges.
Well, he's 60 years old now. By the time this trial starts, he'll be 61.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the best health.
Mm-hmm.
He's overweight. He had cancer at one point. I don't know whether that's been taken care of or not, but it's a very ugly situation for a man that age at this point. 10 years could be life at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, being in prison at 61 years
take
old.
Take a life, give a life. And that's just the way I see it.
Well, like I said in the beginning of this interview, his lawyer filed statements to basically say that everything he said in the interviews, in the book, that's all for entertainment purposes only.
Mm-hmm.
And, this seems to me like a reasonable argument because I've admitted multiple times that I've paid for both of my interviews.
Mm-hmm.
I know that other people have paid him for interviews also. You got this guy, he's an ex-drug kingpin, he's now old, he doesn't want to get a regular 9-to-5 job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me go ahead and make up a whole bunch of nonsense and keep getting paid thousands of dollars every time I do this, and this is how I'm going to support myself.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, it's really not a reasonable argument because even if it was just for entertainment purposes, that doesn't make it not true.
Okay. And you feel it's 100% true.
Absolutely.
So everything you've cross-checked.
When we were in the closed doors of his attorney's office, that was certainly not for entertainment purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing entertaining about that whole.
Although Keefe is a very entertaining character, as you know.
As I know. Did you guys talk in the past few years at all, or?
No, I mean, once the book came out, I went and met with him. After I retired, I went to his house. I informed him, hey, I'm putting a book out. I'm going to divulge everything that you told us. I'm letting you know ahead of time because I think that you ought to be aware of the fact that everything you've told us is going to go public. And I don't want to see any, my intention here is not to get anybody hurt. So I'm making you aware of that. Of course, his response is, man, I'm a killer motherfucker and I handle my business. Don't worry about it. It's like, okay, just thought I'd let you know. Seemed like the responsible thing to do. Did the same thing with Suge's girlfriend, let her know. Mm-hmm. And then that's it. That was the last time we ever spoke.
Do you see any chance of him getting off?
Not unless the judge, if a motion to exclude his public statements from trial, then yes. But and I can't see a judge doing that. So if a motion to exclude is rejected by the court and his public statements are going to be introduced into the court record, then I think he's done. And I think at that time he'll realize that a plea deal is his best option.
Right, but a plea deal won't be like time served or anything.
Oh, no. He's going to prison for murder for, like, as you said, probably 25 with the possibility of parole, which would be, at the minimum, a 15-year sentence.
Right, he gets out of 75, 76 if he's lucky.
Yeah.
You also said something interesting. You said that if he's able to prove that everything he said was a lie, then doesn't that violate the proffer agreement?
That's a great point. That's a point I've been, contemplating also. So if he's saying this is all a lie, then yeah, you lied in the proffer, so that we should be able to introduce the proffer into trial and then let the jury decide when you were lying, if you were lying.
Well, if he violates the proffer, can't you charge him for the PCP case? Or is it too late for that?
I think the statutes run out on the dope case.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just up to the jury. He can't actually go to jail for lying in the proffer if he was in fact lying.
No, he wouldn't be. No.
Why do you think, because if you really think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did the proffer. He beat a life sentence for PCP and cocaine.
He didn't beat it. He just, he never faced it.
He never faced it, which would have been a life sentence.
It would have been 25-year minimum mandatory. So on the federal guidelines, the sentencing guidelines, 25-year minimum.
Okay. Which is a lot of time.
Yeah.
You managed to beat 25 years on a major drug case. You sat there and you admitted to a whole bunch of stuff. Yes, Greg Kading put it out at a certain point, but you're not being charged with any of this stuff. If Keefe had just basically be quiet at that point for the rest of his life, there is no way he could be charged for Tupac's murder.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. No, well,
yes, you have the dirt
unless
rocks
there's information out there that we're unaware of, unless there was other people that...
But these people have not popped up. So we should assume that doesn't exist.
Agreed.
Or whoever can say something is not going to say something.
Agreed.
Or they're just not alive anymore to say it.
Agreed.
Right? Dirt Rock is the only person who was talking. He wasn't even there. It's not like a Dirt Rock confession could put Keefe in jail had he not done any interviews or any books.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Why do you think he chose to start talking?
I honestly think that he felt that he was immune. He must have thought that. The book comes out. Nobody's doing anything. It becomes very well known that he has confessed to his role in Tupac's murder. Nothing happens from 2011 until, 2018. Nothing happens. And so I've probably felt emboldened. Like, well, nothing's going to happen. If it hasn't happened yet, it's probably not going to happen. Let me go out there and see if I can capitalize on this financially. And also, you've met him. I've spent quite a bit of time with him. he is a legend in his own mind. He's a narcissist. And when you aren't getting the attention that you feel you deserve, then you go out there and figure out a way to create that attention.
My theory has always been that the snitch jacket was weighing so heavily on him that he felt he needed to defend his name.
That may have played a role too.
From what I understand, like his family was really upset over this happening. Like I think Orlando's mother's still alive, and essentially, I remember like in interviews with Boosie, he was talking about how Keefe basically made his nephew hated until the end of time. People knew it was Orlando, but he's the one that really cemented it and said, no, it really was my nephew. Right.
So from the general public, from the Tupac fans around the world and true crime people, the nephew is that's what he's known for. He's just this gang member killer. Within the inner circle of the gang, Orlando's kind of hailed as, their own martyr, their own local hero.
Yeah.
Because he brought so much recognition to their gang because of what he did. So there's different ways of looking at it. Keefe D's perspective is much more about how I'm perceived by the people from my streets. But I agree with you. One of the driving factors probably was him wanting to go public in order to, well, I don't know how that would actually work, because if you have a problem with being perceived as a snitch because you worked with law enforcement, and now you're going to just kind of start dry snitching again publicly, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You're not actually redeeming your...
Well, I think his idea was, yes, I cooperated, but my co-conspirators in my drug case all got to go free, which is true.
Well, but there was such a small, let me just tell you, there was this very small, like, he acts like he saved his family.
Right.
And all of this. There was a guy named Trevor Reed, a guy named Daryl Mason, and another guy whose name I can't remember. Really, those were the three key drug associates. And they were only involved with Keefe D in the cocaine. So they're, it's not very different than being involved in the PCP. The PCP, we rolled back, we took down the lab, we prosecuted somebody on that. So Keefe D didn't save anybody other than a couple of ancillary guys that were involved in his cocaine trafficking. He didn't really, it's not like he saved anybody, other than they would have been picked up probably pursuant to his arrest and charged. But he over-exaggerates.
Right.
Yeah.
But he controlled the narrative.
Yeah.
He came in and said, this is what happened. Yes, I cooperated, but I saved these other guys. And I'm telling on my nephew, but he's already passed, so I'm not hurting him. So, telling on a dead person is always a strange kind of concept. Some people feel still snitching. Most, I think, rational people feel it isn't. It's a dead person. Who cares? They're not being hurt by it. So it's just one of those things where I felt like he wanted to get his story out there. I feel like, as someone who makes, who's built a business around people telling their stories, I know how important that is to people, to get their story out there and have them say their story as opposed to having other people tell their story for them.
Okay. Yeah, I can see where you're going. I feel like you somehow sympathize with him.
It's not really a sympathy. It's just an understanding why people do things.
Okay.
Some
people are just driven by ego.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's all ego at the end of the day. I mean, listen, if you're looking into self-preservation, the most logical thing is to not say anything ever.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But, you see the story over and over again. You see, I interviewed Sammy the Bull.
Mm-hmm.
He admitted to killing 19 people. And at one point he writes a book and does a Diane Sawyer interview and starts using his real name, leaves witness protection, goes to Arizona, and then Gotti sends his hitman down there to go kill him.
Mm-hmm.
He could have stayed in witness protection and been safe forever, but instead he wants to go and write a book. It doesn't make sense.
In order to feed his ego?
To feed his ego, to feed his pocket? No, but actually he has money already. In fact, I'm thinking about a conversation. He had like $4 million that the government let him keep. So he didn't even need the money. He just wanted to feed his ego.
There we go. And at a certain level, it becomes like a narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that guys like Keefe D have.
So Suge Knight is in prison right now. You know, his 28-year sentence is, you know, underway. If Suge Knight says, look, Las Vegas PD, I'm willing to fully cooperate. Because Keefe said that him and Suge locked eyes. Right? In your proffer agreement. Suge was definitely in the car when it happened.
Sure.
100%.
No doubt about that.
He is really the only witness that's left that could actually identify Keefe.
From that moment in time.
Yes.
Yes.
The only human being on earth that could say, I could tell you firsthand that I saw Keefe in this car. He could be the star witness, essentially.
Well, you would run into a lot of credibility issues. And I think that the district attorney would be evaluating very heavily whether or not you would ever even want to put a guy like Suge Knight on the stand, even if he could provide that kind of testimony. I think you can accomplish your trial without it. You put Suge up there and it's gonna distract from the statements that Keefe D made himself. Suge Knight on the stand is, it's a wild card. And why throw a wild card into your equation if you don't need to?
So you don't think there's any chance of
No.
the prosecutor in Las Vegas? I mean, could Las Vegas PD stretch into the California legal system and offer a deal to Suge to cooperate in a totally different state case?
No, I mean, all that Vegas could do would be subpoena him to testify in trial, whether he agreed on that or not, whether or not California authorities would take into consideration his current predicament.
Yeah.
I doubt that they would, personally.
But is it possible? Could California say, look, if Suge takes the stand and does what everyone agrees that he's going to do, like there's no shenanigans, you're going to get on the stand and you're going to say, this is who I saw, and you're going to get cross-examined and you're not going to pull this whole thing of like, Orlando's not the shooter, and
Tupac's alive.
Tupac's still alive, and whatever. If he's just, the same way that Sammy the Bull had to take the stand over and over and over again and got like 5 years for 19 murders, could California potentially say, look, you go and fully cooperate. Now, you do a shenanigan and the deal's off, but you fully cooperate, and you're an old man at this point, we will let you out. Which is very appealing to someone of Suge Knight who has health issues, who's older, who used to be a multimillionaire, who's now living in a dirty cage with a bunch of men. Yes, you could say, I'm never going to snitch or whatever else, but as the time goes by and as your health starts to decrease, you start, I'm sure Suge is thinking about that right now.
He's missing Christmases. He's
missing
birthdays,
Christmases. He's got a lot of kids. Look, I don't care. I've interviewed so many hardcore gangsters who were like, oh, I devoted my whole life to this and I put in all this work and I killed these people and I hurt these people and I moved thousands of tons of cocaine or whatever else. But then when this happened, I turned on everybody. Oh, when they threatened my family, suddenly I turned on everyone and spent the next 2 years testifying. Oh, when I found out that this person was turning against me, okay, that was my excuse. There's always a convenient excuse that someone will use to cooperate when it serves them.
Of course. It's always self-serving.
Is there any chance that Suge could walk away free in exchange for testimony in this Las Vegas case? Based on how the legal system works.
Yeah. I don't see any practical way of that ever happening. Of course, theoretically, it's possible. It's possible in theory. In practicality, it's not going to happen.
Okay. So you think that Suge is going to be totally separate from this case?
100%.
Okay. There's some rumors that have been floating around that Reggie Sr. was at the MGM when all this happened. Reggie Wright Sr.
Yeah, I've seen the rumors. I've seen the ridiculous pictures that they try to claim that was
Right.
Reggie Sr. And
No.
yeah, it's
They also
ridiculous.
didn't they try to say you were there?
Mm-hmm.
That's not true either.
I was in the MGM. I was one of the bicycle cops that rode up in the shorts. And yeah, of course, these conspiracy theorists are very loose and fanciful with their imaginations.
Okay. Now the DA in Vegas said there's physical evidence tying Keefe D to Tupac's murder. You know about this?
No. Physical evidence. I'm not aware of what specific evidence they're talking about.
Yeah, so apparently there's some physical evidence, but they're not saying what it is yet.
Okay.
I guess they could hold on to that until court is about to start, and then they'll release it to the defense.
Well, they have to go through the discovery process pretty quick. And the discovery process means you have to divulge everything that you have to Keefe's defense team. And sometimes that stuff comes in one big bundle. Sometimes it trickles through. But ultimately, whatever that physical evidence is, Keefe D's lawyer is going to have to know about it before the first day of trial.
Got it. In my last interview with Keefe D, he said, if I go to jail for Tupac's murder, Reggie Wright Jr. should go to jail for Biggie's murder.
Just like I said, when he said, bet you Keefe D getting locked up for Tupac murder? And I said, he need to be right in handcuffs with me for Biggie murder, because I know he had his hands in that shit. That's what was my get back to him.
Well, it's really interesting that their perceptions of one another. Reggie Wright thought that Keefe D and Southside Crips were actually responsible for Biggie's murder originally. So these guys, they're just talking through, the rumor mill of the streets and their own conclusions about what happened. So perhaps Keefe D actually feels that Reggie had something to do with that. But again, it's just like Reggie feeling like Keefe D had something to do with it. They're just throwing dirt at each other with no evidence.
Yeah, I think Suge Knight on his podcast was accusing Snoop Dogg and some of his associates of being involved in Tupac's murder also. Like, it's really just, it's kind of just like a train wreck.
It is a train wreck.
Clusterfuck of every direction. Everyone's, it's going back to Suge Knight had Tupac set up with him sitting in the car.
Yeah, it was the government.
It was the government. Yeah. I remember interviewing Chris Carroll, the first responder. Mm-hmm. We talked about the whole theory that he switched bodies. So he would have to be riding around Las Vegas with a corpse, like on his back somehow.
There was even a story I read that I had switched the body. Right. I'm a guy on a bicycle. I don't have another dead guy on the back of my bike to switch a body. I'm like, I don't know, do these people give any thought whatsoever to these type of things? It's not only could I not switch a body, nobody can switch a body. Well, first of all, you have to have a body handy when this goes down.
Right.
And then there's multiple people from the whole way. I mean, he goes into the trauma center. He's got a team of probably a dozen people working on him the whole way with cops there and everything else. And it's just, those things, they make great stories, but you only have to look into it about that far to see how ridiculous it is.
How about the helicopter girl?
There's a helicopter girl, right? Then there's her who claimed that Tupac was airlifted out of there, but that wasn't true either.
She must have been on one.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on. Gene Deal has made a lot of statements around this. I've interviewed Gene before. Some of the stuff he said didn't add up. Like some of the stuff he said about Lil C's when he interviewed Lil C's was like, no, that's not what happened. I was there.
Yeah.
That's not the timeline of events. I interviewed Gene primarily because he was there because, during the Biggie murder, he was actually there. So I really wanted that story.
Right.
But what do you feel about Gene's various accusations and so forth?
Well, I go back to what he said originally. I take that as the most accurate depiction of what his memory was. It was back then. Mm-hmm. And it's, he's expounded on it and kind of continued to elaborate with things that go against his original statement. So I look at his original statement as having the most value. It's the most meaningful. He didn't see anything other than some lights taking off after the shooting. The best witnesses, and they had very limited information themselves, was Gregory Young, which was the driver of Biggie's Suburban, and of course Little Cease, who was behind Biggie.
Yeah.
But all of this happened in the blink of an eye, and as you probably know, when shots are fired, and especially in your immediate vicinity, you duck. You don't stick your head out trying to figure out what's going on. You try to instinctively protect yourself.
Yeah.
And so it all happened very, very quick. There's very little information. Other than those two guys were probably the best of the witnesses. Gene Deal didn't see much. He has this hang up with this Nation of Islam guy.
The bow tie guy, yeah.
Yeah, the bow tie guy that he encountered beforehand.
Amir Muhammad?
Well, he'll claim that, as will Phil Carson, but he's been exonerated from early on. Amir Muhammad is a victim of a bunch of people's inability to investigate properly and to understand and put together the facts of the case.
Have you ever met with Amir?
Not in person, but I've spoken to him many times.
Over the phone?
Mm-hmm.
And what's his take?
He's like, hey, this is all fucked up. You know, you guys, you have no idea what my life has been like and what you've done to me and to my wife. You know, I've had to move out of state.
Huh.
I've lived under this constant cloud of false allegations, and I sympathize with him. You know, our job is not just to hold people accountable for what they've done, but we're also supposed to protect people from false allegations.
Right. Well, because he visited David Mack in jail.
Yeah, after the bank robbery.
And I just read Labyrinth recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess thing is he used a fake name.
No, he didn't.
No, so that part's not true.
Not at all. It's the visiting form that he filled out when he visited David Mack. He put his real name, he put his real address, he put his real driver's license number. The only thing that he changed was the numbers on his social security number, because he knew that this people have access to this form, and he's in the real estate business, and he knows the importance of keeping your social security number confidential. And this is what he said in his deposition also, by the way. And he's like, yeah, I wasn't going to put my real social security number down on a form that people can see and copy. But he used his real name, his real address, his real driver's license number, and all of that. So if you're trying to hide your identity, he did it in about the worst possible way you could.
Okay, so you feel Amir Muhammad had nothing to do with it?
I don't feel it. I know it.
You know it. Okay. Well, what I didn't actually know that you told me before the interview is that Tupac had another rape accusation?
Yeah, a police report was made in Los Angeles wherein a female reported this sexual assault, and but she didn't want to move forward with the prosecution, and so the case was cited lack of evidence, meaning that they declined to prosecute because you have an unwilling victim.
Okay, but she did file a police report initially.
Right.
And you're telling me the story around this police report was very similar to the Ayanna Jackson situation?
Yeah, if you read both reports, you can't not think of that other sexual assault incident that he was convicted of. They're very, very similar in the structure of the events. And I'm not saying that either of these are necessarily true. Obviously, he got convicted, but I think...
Well, he was on appeal also, so...
And there was mitigating circumstances, and I believe you've interviewed her, right?
Yeah, I interviewed Ayanna, yeah.
So, yeah, it's probably just more coincidental, but it's a very unknown fact about that, about his LA case. If we are accepting that the information in the report is true, then yes, it could be a problem for him. But then again, it's one of those things where you're a celebrity and you are having different interactions with females. And then the next day, somebody goes to the police and makes makes allegations that are a little bit exaggerated. And I'm not saying they were. I'm just saying that this happens. And so because there was not a thorough investigation, because she declined to prosecute, we don't really know what the truth of that was.
Right. Well, Greg Kading, thank you so much for coming in.
Good to see you again, Vlad.
Yeah, good to see you again also.
Merry Christmas.
The person who started this whole, this whole ball of yarn that's
like
ultimately...
The snowball.
The snowball
going down the hill.
That grew very big in 2023. We'll ultimately see what happens. You feel that Keefe is going to get found guilty or he's going to plead out?
I think he'll probably plead out. That's my prediction.
He'll plead out.
If he goes to trial, if he decides to go to trial and they allow his public statements to be entered into record, then he'll get convicted.
But if everything gets thrown out,
He walks.
he walks. All right. That's
Yep.
where we're going to end it. Greg, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Peace.
All right.